Welcome to The Nudge. I'm Andrea McCabe, heart-centered educator and architect of awakening. In our last episode, we explored something many people struggle to recognize. It's the difference between our inner voice and the constant stream of thoughts that move through our mind. It's that quiet inner knowing. It's that voice that judges us in a particular direction. But there is another voice that often speaks much louder. The inner critic. The voice that judges our mistakes, questions our worth, and quietly tells us stories about who we are. So the nudge this week is simple. Begin noticing the voice of your inner critic. Because learning to recognize that voice is often the first step in quieting the active mind. Sometimes the inner critic is easy to recognize, but sometimes it becomes so familiar that we don't even notice it anymore. Let me ask you something. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, I'm not good enough? I should have done better. Why can't I figure this out? Or maybe you're comparing yourself to someone. They seem to have it together. What's wrong with me? For many people, those thoughts are not occasional. They're constant. It's like a running commentary in the background of the mind. And when those thoughts repeat often enough, something really important starts to happen. They stop feeling like thoughts and they begin to feel like our truth. There's a psychologist named Richard Schwartz, who's the founder of Internal Family Systems. He describes these voices as different parts of the mind. According to Schwartz, many of us develop these protective parts to prevent us from being hurt again. The inner critic is often one of those parts. In its own way, it believes it's actually helping us. It thinks that if it judges us first, if it pushes us harder, if it keeps reminding us where we're falling short, it might protect us from things like embarrassment, rejection, or even failure. So the inner critic isn't there to destroy us. It's trying to protect us, just in a way that over time becomes actually quite harmful. These protective parts often continue doing their job long after we actually need them for protection. And that voice has been running the show in the background. We stop recognizing it as one part of our thinking. We begin to believe it's the truth about who we are. Once you begin listening for it, you may notice the critic tends to appear in a few special ways. Sometimes it shows up as perfectionism. It could be things like, that wasn't good enough. I should have done better. You can't afford to make mistakes. Sometimes it shows up as comparison. It's like, look at how well they're doing. Why can't I figure this out? Why does everyone else seem to have it together except me? And sometimes the inner critic appears as this like preemptive self-attack. And it's out there to criticize you before anyone else has the chance. It's like, that was stupid. Why did you say that? You're going to mess this up. In a strange way, this critic believes that if it judges you first, the judgment from others won't actually hurt as much. When these patterns repeat long enough, they stop feeling like strategies. They begin to feel like truth. And once a thought feels like truth, we rarely question it. We simply believe it. For me, the voice of the inner critic just wasn't one thought. It was a whole pattern of thinking that followed me everywhere I went. Perfectionism, comparison, self-attack, you name it, I was doing it. It was this constant stream of commentary about how I was performing, what I had said, what I should have done differently. And at the center of this pattern was one thought that repeated over and over again. It was, you're stupid. Every mistake, every wrong turn, every awkward moment, that thought would appear immediately. All of those thoughts, they really served the same purpose. They kept me small. They kept me from taking risks. They kept me from putting myself out there, from speaking up, even from forming deeper relationships. Looking back now, I can see that this was a part of my mind that really did believe it was protecting me, kept me from making mistakes, kept me from standing out, kept me from looking foolish, and maybe I wouldn't get hurt. But the cost of that protection was enormous. It really wasn't protecting me from anything. It was preventing me from living a full life. Now, that belief, as I said, was pretty much a part of me. I really did think I was stupid. I really bought into that whole idea. It was my excuse for everything. So I had a friend who challenged this belief. When I said to her that I was stupid, she looked at me with this glare like, "What the heck are you talking about?" I was helping her break down some really complex concepts in a book that she was writing, and she was actually taken aback by what I said. She said, "You're not stupid at all." And it's like, "Oh, yes, I am." We began to talk about it, and then I asked her a simple question. I said, "Is there a way that I can change this? Because what you're saying makes some sense. There's a big part of me that feels that I'm stupid, and I don't know how to get rid of that thought." So, what she explained was in order to change a thought, on some level, we have to convince our brain that there is evidence to refute that. So, we made a list. They were real experiences that contradict the story my mind had been repeating. I earned a university degree even though I rarely attended classes. I became an assistant department head after teaching only one course in the area. I successfully coached sports that I had never even played. I later became a department head and was chosen to present at provincial conferences. The point of that list wasn't to prove that I was exceptional. The point was that these were real moments that my brain could not dismiss. There were pieces of evidence that contradicted the story I'd believed for years. And every one of us has moments like that. Moments we may have been overlooked, moments we may have been dismissed, but moments that quietly reveal something about who we are. My job was simple, yet actually complex. Every time the thought appeared, "You're stupid," I answered the list, in the same order, every time, again and again and again. You get the picture? And I didn't say it quietly, I said it with conviction. It was like I was presenting this proof of an argument that I actually intended to win. So this is where things changed. One afternoon, I was driving to a football game. I'd driven to that stadium so many times, I knew the route without even thinking. But on that day, I took a wrong turn. Instantly, a familiar voice appeared. "Stupid." But this time, something different happened. Before I even had time to think, the response I had practiced came forward. "No, that's not true. I'm intelligent." And then the evidence followed exactly the way I'd memorized it, in the same order: the university degree, the assistant department head position, coaching sports I'd never played, the department head role, the provincial presentations. Those words came out with certainty. It was like I was presenting something that mattered, and then something extraordinary happened. The voice stopped. Completely. For the first time in my life, that constant chatter was gone. There was no critic. There was no judgment. Just silence. At the time, I don't know if I fully understood what had happened. I was just really happy that I didn't have this constant chatter anymore. But I knew something in my mind had changed. Looking back now, I can see how significant that moment actually was. Not because it solved everything, because it didn't. There are many layers of healing and self-discovery that came later on. But in many respects, that moment was the beginning. It showed me what was possible. It showed me that the stories that we have running in our minds are not fixed. And that realization can open a door for us. Because if one belief can shift, maybe others can shift too. Looking back now, I can also see something else. That moment was a nudge, a quiet moment where something inside me asked me to do something different, to challenge a belief I'd accepted for years. And honoring a nudge almost always involves some sort of risk. The risk of questioning a familiar pattern, the risk of responding differently. The day in the van, that risk was simple. Just to say, nope, that story is not true. If you want to begin working with your inner critic, here are 5 keys. The first key is notice the thought. Most of us move through our day without noticing the thoughts that run through our mind. But the moment you begin noticing the critic, you create a small space between the thought and your identity. I'm going to say that again. The moment you begin noticing that inner critic, you actually are creating a small space between the thought and your identity. This is the point of power. You begin to see that this is a thought, not the truth about who you are. The second key is to question the statement. Ask yourself this simple question. Is this true? The critic often speaks in absolutes, like I'm always this way, or this always happens to me. But when you pause and question it, you begin to see that the statement is actually often exaggerated or even incomplete. The third key is to find the real evidence. This is what anchors it in. You have to look for experiences in your real life that contradict this critic's story. These are the moments that show that you are capable, that you're resilient, that you have kindness, courage, or intelligence. It doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. It just has to be real. The fourth key is to repeat the evidence. The brain changes through repetition. Every time the thought appears, answer it with your evidence, the same evidence, in the same order, every single time. Over time, our brain develops what's called new neural pathways. And the last key is you must respond with conviction. Don't whisper this truth. You have to speak it with certainty, with a level of emotion. It's the way you would respond if someone said something about you that simply wasn't true, and you were respecting your values. You were standing up for who you are. Because in that moment, you are teaching your mind a new story. So the nudge this week is simple. Notice the voice of the inner critic. When it appears, pause. Question the story it's telling. And begin gathering the real evidence that challenges it. You might be surprised how powerful it can be to challenge just one belief. Next week, we'll explore another voice that many people struggle with, the thinking mind, the voice that analyzes, plans, and worries, and how learning to quiet it can make it easier to hear that voice that truly matters, the inner voice, the nudge. So this week, pay attention to the stories running through your mind. Notice the critic, question the story, and honor the moment when something inside you asks you to respond differently. Honor the nudge, because shift happens. Have a great week. See you soon.